Question is art the language of emotion?
Art can be an avenue for expressing emotion, but some art isn't about emotion at all. It doesn't necessarily have to be so.
Do you-
Most people would connect that there is emotion, but some of that emotion that might be in the art could be projected by the viewer. It may not have been intended by the artist. Sometimes the artist is intending an emotion, and if they're a successful communicator, then they're able to get that across. Things such as like color can affect very much the way people react to a given piece of work. But not all work is meant to be emotional. Some of it's quite minimalistic and has nothing to do with emotion at all.
Do you think, for successful art, who knows what successful is, but for successful art, does it need to convey emotion?
No.
No.
I don't. Because as I said, it may not necessarily be the intent. Maybe the piece is supposed to be about the monotony of the industrial age. Like everything is just repeated in a pattern that's very monotonous kind of looking. Well, some people might think monotonous, and other people might think, well, that's just a pleasing that it repeats kind of thing. But it wasn't about trying to express rage or happiness or joy or I don't know, confusion or whatever it is that the artist wanted. The difficult thing about being an artist is being able to communicate what it is that you want to communicate. So you have to understand how people are affected by things, and if as an artist everybody's misinterpreting what you're doing, then you're not communicating very well. But if they're getting what it is that you're trying to get across, then you probably have a pretty good mastery of the principles of design.
What would you consider the definition of art if you had to kind of
Art is the longest way possible to express anything.
the longest way possible?
It's the longest route.
Do you think it's kind of, well, if you consider art to include things like literature and poetry, would you consider art to be superior in conveying emotion than any
When
other
you say
field?
art, are you speaking of visual art?
I'm speaking of any kind of medium of art.
Because we can talk about movement, we can talk about acting, we can talk about words, we can talk about images. That there are so many potential avenues for expressing something through art. What I mean by that, it's the longest way. For instance, say if you had the theme, and you want to express that war is hell. That's your big thought that you want to get across. Well, you could just write that, war is hell, period, and be done with it. Most artists aren't going to be happy with that. They're more likely to make like a 3-act opera and build costumes and sets and, very elaborately to get to that same message. But the way in which it is felt will be much deeper through art than if you just read war is hell on a piece of paper. So to me, that's why it's often the longest route. Although sometimes, you can brilliantly do something very directly, like a 2-minute gesture drawing of a human figure could tell you really everything you need to know about that figure and be brilliant in that 2 minutes. Where somebody else is making, I don't know, a sculpture like Michelangelo that takes him 7 years to carve out his David. Time is kind of a variable you can't really control on it. It really just depends on what the artist's intent is and what they're trying to express and how long it's going to take them, whatever avenue they chose to go after. Art definitely is a incredibly strong way to express emotion, to package emotions, to get that across. And I think in particular theater, film, it's much more visceral when you're seeing it. Theater even more so than film because you're there and it's happening live and the audience is part of the experience. How they're reacting to it is part of it.
So when you consider specific mediums like theater or literature or visual art, would you say that there's one medium that's superior in conveying emotion?
For me, it's theater.
For you, it's theater.
Theater has all aspects of it. It's live. It has all the visual art in the costuming and the props and the backgrounds, the sets. It has text, as somebody's written something, but then there's the interpretation by the artist of how those lines are said, and there's movement, there's lighting. There are just multiple things all happening at once that can make theater very powerful. However, sometimes because there's so many aspects to it, it can get jumbled and be difficult for the audience to get whatever it is that you were trying to get across. It's important for the director to understand that people can only take in so much at one time, and where is the focus supposed to be in a given scene or in the given production? What is it that's supposed to be the takeaway, and are the audience going to get that?
And, in your life, is there one kind of instance where theater has stood out, like one play, for example, that stood out and really touched you emotionally?
I'm a fan of Sondheim musicals. Every one that I've seen has been pretty amazing. They're powerful, they're very deeply layered, they have amazing wit. There's some classic plays that I love, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I mean, if we're talking about, is it plays that I've seen, plays that I've been in as an actor, plays that I've directed, they're different loves. They're all different children, right? But yeah, they're powerful.